Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I am your host, Dr. Heidi Horsley, and I'm here today with my guest talking about post-traumatic growth and transformation through grief. And I love this topic because when my brother died, I was 20 years old, and I did not think I would ever grow from that. I did not think I would ever transform. I couldn't imagine my life with any kind of hope. So we're going to talk today with guests that have been through this, they have found hope, they have had post-traumatic growth, and we'll also find out what exactly post-traumatic growth is. So let me introduce our guest first. Sitting next to me is John Santoro. Hi, John.
Hi, Heidi.
So John's daughter, Paula, died from the hidden effects of hyper-rare genetic syndrome. He has been very involved in the Compassionate Friends since Paula's death, serving on the National Board of Directors, where he was board president, and serving as a trustee on the Compassionate Friends Foundation. As a result of his service, he received the prestigious Simon Stevens Award. John co-founded the Paula Rosina Santoro Foundation, which funds and advises community service projects in New Jersey. He currently serves on the faculty at NYU, where he was honored for his teaching excellence. Hi again, John. Welcome.
Thank you.
Next to John is Shari O'Laughlin.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Heidi.
Shari O'Laughlin is the Chief Executive Officer of the Compassionate Friends. Her 14-year-old son, Connor, was killed in the plane crash, and her sister died earlier in her life. Shari is the author of the book Life from the Ashes, Finding Signs of Hope After Loss, and formerly served as Executive Director for the Children's Grief Center of New Mexico. She is a certified grief leadership coach and has developed corporate programs for supporting grief in the workplace and stewarding clients through grief. Welcome, Shari.
Thank you.
Next to Shari is Andy McNiel. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Heidi.
Andy is the Senior Advisor of Youth Programs at the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, also known as TAPS. He is a consultant and advisor for the Compassionate Friends and co-founder of the Satori Group, a national consulting firm focused on grief and loss. Andy is also trainer for the American Foundation for Suicide and the co-author of Understanding and Supporting Bereaved Children, a Practical Guide for Professionals. So, I think we're going to just start right off with why is it why or how?
Either. Why?
Either.
Why or how do I go about growing from a loss? How does my grief transform? And what were your thoughts about this after your daughter died?
Well, it takes a while,
Yeah.
I mean, you are coping with the super profound loss, something that most people can't even imagine. And the idea that you're actually going to grow in some fashion from this is just so foreign that it's almost beyond comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we all have these thoughts about, will I ever grow again? Will I ever love again? Will I ever, how will I ever feel normal? And you don't feel normal for a long time. And you actually never get back to a state of normalcy that you know before the loss happened. But eventually, in my case, I just felt like one of the ways I could honor Paula was, working. My wife and I founded the Paula Rosina Santoro Foundation along with our son Michael. We started getting into projects that were going to help the community and kind of honor Paula. And then, even growing from there, the idea that I could be a college professor or a member of the Compassionate Friends board or things like that were ways that I could channel my grief into positivity. So that's how I became involved. And it took a while. It took years.
It took years. That's good for people out there to know
Yes.
when they're hearing about this. I mean, my life completely changed when my brother died. And I ended up going into grief and loss and becoming a psychologist, but it took years before I was in that place to figure out what is my new identity and why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and
What about you all?
And
Yeah.
quite frankly,
Mm-hmm.
it's when we're new in our grief, it's kind of insulting
Yeah.
to hear someone say,
Right.
"Well, you'll grow through this." Like that. That's sort of obnoxious sounding, right? And so when you're first thrust into this world that you didn't ask for, the last thing you're thinking about is growth or how you grow. At the same time, there's this reality that growth is possible, and it does take time, But I would say not just time, it also takes time and it takes work. Like it's hard work. I had a good friend who said one time, you know, I live 30 minutes from my work. If I get into my car in the afternoon when my work's done, and I sit in my car for 30 minutes, I'm not going to get home. I have to crank the car, put it in gear. So it's time and it's a lot of hard work that you then find yourself at this place where you can look back and say, wow, my life, not only have I grown, my life is completely transformed. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look like necessarily what it looked like before, and I'm transformed as a person. I'm doing things that I never imagined that I would be able to do in my life. So it's kind of looking at that bigger picture. But at first, I wouldn't recommend going to someone and saying, you're going to grow through this,
Right.
right? Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
And I would say, you know, I can say this for sure as a bereaved parent. I think most would agree. I can say it as a bereaved sibling from my youth. When something profoundly tragic like that happens, you feel very broken. You feel like a broken person. And parts of us inside are broken. There's no question. They don't work the same way. You know, our heart is hurting on a level that is incomprehensible, and our brain is trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. So that occupies space for a long time, but then that almost becomes a new foundation to create something from that. And you know, again, it's not early on, but I would say there's an intentionality, which is what Andy's referring to, because we change. You know, post-traumatic growth, the definition of it, and I would say from experience, which you probably would say the same, you care about different things than you cared about before. Meaning is made differently in your life than meaning was before. Things are important in different ways, and you value different things in different people, and you become, by necessity, a deeper person. So you can't operate quite at the same place you were before. Whether you would give that all back, which most of us would, or not, that's where you are. So growth really is a mindful process of taking what all was destroyed and then moving to the new place. And there's a great concept I always loved. I may not pronounce it perfectly. It's a Japanese tradition called kintsugi, and it's with broken pots. So when a pot is broken, in our Western way of thinking, we would think the old pot was beautiful and these shattered pieces are a mess, and we often throw them away, right? And they put the pot back together with gold lining, and you can see from the outside it isn't a pot with smooth sides that are unblemished, which is the way we feel we were before grief, but it's considered more beautiful and deeper. And to me, that's a representation of post-traumatic growth that we can find as we go through that very hard work of grief and journeying.
And sometimes early on in our grief, because that concept is so foreign, this idea that I'm you know, being transformed in a way, our society is a very restorative society. We want to make things the way they were. So it's sort of like, what was your starting point before your loss? We're going to get you back to that. And friends or family may say, you know, I miss the old you.
Oh, yeah.
And the reality is there's this new me, and I'm still figuring out who that new me is, right, in that process. But, you know, we've all watched, you know, those shows on TV where they're going to restore an old house to its original condition, right? So you watch it, you're watching them do this. They never restore the house. They transform it. And that's the idea, that you have this foundation. There's still that you who was you, and you carry that with you, but you're building on that. You're not going backwards, you're moving somewhere. And that's an idea of post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth is that you land in a new place. You don't bounce back. It's a little different than the idea of resilience. So if you think of resilience as, if I have a rubber ball and I bounce it against a wall and it comes back to me, right? That's resilience. But post-traumatic growth is, I throw that ball and there's no wall there. It just keeps, it bounces wherever.
Forward.
And it lands somewhere different. That's that concept.
It doesn't bounce back, it bounces forward.
Bounces forward.
It's interesting because when Scott died, I felt like it was an identity loss, and I felt like something had been done to me. I felt like I had been victimized. I felt helpless and hopeless. And it wasn't until I turned my grief outward into service and into connecting with others that I felt a shift.
Yeah.
It was very empowering, and that I started to feel like I was moving more towards growth. And I'm just wondering, how do people do it? How did you do it, and how do others do it? Where do they start? How do they start? What are your thoughts, John?
Well, I think you have to get to a certain place in your grief journey before you can even start thinking about that. And again, for me, it was going to take a couple of years till I could get to that place. And one of the things I did was really kind of simplify my life, to could get through the initial stages of grief. I mean, I was on the corporate ladder, so to speak, and I kind of stepped off that and turned down some opportunities. I had to take a job I knew I could do, right after Paula died. Right, I had to take I turned down some really interesting opportunities because I just had to be able to do the job when I returned to work. And then once you get to it and you start thinking about how can you help others, whether it's people in the grief community or not, and then you just kind of move from there. And I've had some really interesting moves that I didn't predict. For example, when I started to teach at NYU, I also became a union member because we're represented by a union, and now I'm active in the union. And I know, my father was a union person, and he would be, I think, honored by the fact that I'm doing this. I'm working on really important things like getting parental leave for our adjunct professors and working with
I love this.
our folks. So, and parental leave, by the way, would include, grief leave, right? So it's just opening, you're opening doors, and you can't really know where you're going, but eventually you realize you're not in the first place you were.
I think, and again, it's not a super conscious process, but you do at some point pass through a time where you're looking a little bit more forward instead of just behind, and feeling a little bit more of a full range of emotions in the world instead of just sort of horrible pain that you might carry. And it's at that point, it's finding something to invest in life, whatever that is, and that investment is usually growth of some sort. So, some people who have had a loss by a drunk driver, has lost someone to a drunk driver, will go speak to high school students about the dangers of drinking and driving. And that's investing in a different way in life and in people than they may have thought of before. Some people who had a loss to a disease or illness will work on funding research for that, or having walks where money is raised to invest in research. And again, that's a reinvestment of some form in their life. And so I think it's really baby steps. It's what thing could I do now at this point that makes me a little bit, lets me give back and lets me have an impact on the world to something that matters to me. And that can grow then into lots of different forms of growth.
I like this. And after Connor died, what did that look like in your life?
Good question. I think, so for me it was interesting. I turned to gratitude. That was a gratitude practice, which was really hard because, your initial feeling is, what do I have to be grateful for when you took my son? So I started very small. Every day when I walked my dog, I would notice all the things around me to be grateful for, whether that was the sun on the trees at that moment, or the sun setting on the mountains at that moment, or my dog who made me happy and, was good to hug when I was so sad. And that practice of gratitude built a lot in my life. And, just as we said, it's hard work. It's not easy. Some days you wake up and say, I have nothing I can find to be grateful for, and I don't even want anybody to ask me of that. But my days were always better when I could get a little bit better at that. And somehow that gratitude practice that I was really proactive about doing each day led to changes in my life. So I wrote a book because there were all these books about how to survive the first year, the first of their birthday, the first of your birthday without them, the first holiday, all that stuff. And then on day 366, it felt god-awful, and there's no book around for it. So I decided to write one because I was walking through what that might, and if that could help someone else, then I would do it. But I don't think I would have found that if I didn't start some steps of gratitude and just trying to say what is good in my life. And I had 2 daughters to work hard to be better for, so that they had some kind of mom back that would be a good mom for them down the road.
I like this, and I always say when I couldn't think of anything, I thought I'm better for, although I'm poor for having lost Scott, I'm much richer for ever having known him for 17 and a half years.
Yes.
So that's where I can be grateful,
Yes,
if for nothing
absolutely.
else.
Yep.
You almost have to lean into that pain of it to
Yeah.
get to the place where you can even say that.
Yes.
You know, for a lot of people who I've shared space with who are in the just the depths of their grief, there's a period of time that their grief is managing them. They're not managing their grief.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, if I had a nickel for everyone who has sent me their book that they wrote after the death of their child, their spouse, their, you know, whoever it might be, because I think there's something about writing things down that's the beginning of saying, this is managing me, I'm going to give it a language, because it doesn't have a language right now, and I need to give it one. One of the things I've recommended to people over the years, and I've had so many people come back to me and say, I experienced a shift when I did this, and that is to give your grief words.
I like this.
Because it lacks a language. So, and I'm not even talking about writing. Some of us are great writers. I've read your book. It's a fantastic book. You're a great writer. Not everyone can put things into sentences and paragraphs and it be something that's compelling. I'm talking about just write down words. Just literally single words and think about what is this pain like and what word would I give that? And then go to a thesaurus and look at all the other words that are related to that word and see if those words strike you in some way, right? And so that you give those words. And when we can give words to our grief, we begin to start, not that we're in control of it, but we're getting a little bit of our center of control back, where I'm naming this. And if I can name it, I can do something with it. I had a mom who came to me for several years, and I remember, I think it was her almost 3 years that she had been coming to sessions. And she came in this one week, and she just looked different. I don't know how to describe it. She just looked like a different person. And she sat down, and I said, I just said what I saw. You look different to me. And she said, oh, how so? I said, you look like you have a glow that I haven't seen when you come in. And she said, well, actually, today is a really great day. She said, since my daughter died, I at first felt like I had no options and no choices. And so within a couple of months after her death, I said, I'm going to force myself to get out and do something. She said, so Vacation Bible School was coming up in my church, so I volunteered for Vacation Bible School that summer. I went. I was not emotionally, mentally, or spiritually there. Like I just was not present, but I did it. I went through the routine. Then the next year I did the same thing. She said, this year, I just got out of Vacation Bible School before I came here. This year, I was fully present. I feel like I'm connected in some way. And she said, I don't know what the difference is though. And then she spent the rest of the session going back to when her daughter died and just taking me through all of what it was. Because it wasn't any one thing that she did.
Right.
It was everything that she did. And it all amounted to, at some point, she woke up and felt connected. But connected in a different way. Not how she was before, but connected, more present with the kids. Yeah.
I'm wondering what gets in the way of post-traumatic growth.
I'll use a word, fatalism.
Okay.
This idea that I don't have any control over my life.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter what I do, bad things are going to happen. And the reality is, I mean, you can be the best person in the world, and tragedy can still strike you and strike your family, right? We all know that that's true. At the same time, if you just lean into that fatalistic thinking and say, well, why make any choices? Why even try to work at this?
Right.
Why try to even work to feel a connection with life again, because things can just happen. That type of attitude that can seep into us, that can definitely put a wall between you and what could be post-traumatic growth in your life. It's when we can lean into our personal agency and believe that our choices still matter in some way. It reminds me of Viktor Frankl, the psychologist and neurologist, I believe he was, and he survived the Holocaust in World War II. His entire family died in the death camps, except for one sister and Dr. Frankl. And when he was in the death camps, here he is at the bottom of despair, but he said, I had to find ways that I could still find meaning in life. So he said it's relationships and it's through hard work. He said the Nazis would tell me, go dig a hole. And he said, I would dig a hole and it'd be the best looking hole they've ever seen. And I would get out of the hole and go, well, look at that beautiful hole, right? And you would think that's so simple, but it is in that moment that he didn't allow this fatalistic view of, oh, well, who cares? I throw my hands up. He kept this sense of, I believe that my choices matter and I'm going to lean into that. And that includes my ability to just find that little bit of gratitude, even though it's hard to find.
And I would add, and this is a tough one, but blame and anger at the cause, which we all have a right to. So any listener listening, absolutely, whatever they're going through, they have every right to and will for a long time, and it's really normal. And also, after time, it's not very helpful. So for example, you know, Connor was killed in an airplane crash, and after all the investigations for years, there's really not an answer why. So I can be angry at a lot of people and things, and was, but in the end that doesn't take me very far. I can't grow that way, I really can't. And I can't bring honor to the world in Connor's memory and honor in my daughter's, in mine, and what we went through. So there was a point I had to choose to let go of something I really had every right to feel. Similarly with my sister's death as a child, you know, that was also unanswerable, and you know, somebody was at hand and we never were able to get any conclusion on it, which holds a lot of anger. But in the long run, if I stay there, I will stay in a world that I don't control, that's really painful, that is fatalistic, that I'm angry at, and I'm not very much good to people. So I have an opportunity at some point to shift if I want to.
What do they say? Anger is like holding a hot coal and waiting for your enemy to get burned.
Yes, exactly.
You're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
You're going to hurt your relationships. You're going to
That's right.
hurt your health. I mean, it's going to hurt you in the long run.
And sorry, I just want to add, many people that we know at Compassionate Friends and outside of it, there's a right to have that anger. There's no question. Somebody took their child's life, or you know, there's a lot of situations. I'm not suggesting that's not absolutely earned and normal, but at some point there may be other choices that might lead a more fulfilling place from there.
Well, that's the hard part for all of us. It's like, how do we acknowledge and validate that this is really hard, and yet hold the hope that you can transform your loss and have post-traumatic growth?
Yeah.
You know, how do we do that? So, John, what were your thoughts about this?
Yeah, baby steps to start. And one of the things we can take hope in and inspiration from really is seeing people who have moved along. And in our, you know, in our family, Pam and I are very proud of our son Michael, okay, who suffered through the death of a twin sister.
Yeah.
You know, he took up music as a way of therapy, and he actually moved on to take up Indian sitar, and he took it to the point where he was becoming competitive, you know, in competitions and so forth, for an instrument that he had to practice, you know, 3 to 4 hours a day. We never had to nag him to practice. He saw this as a way to kind of organize his life and take on something new and move to another place outside of the incredible sadness of losing a twin.
And what a great way to express yourself through the sitar. And I remember him bringing it to the Compassionate Friends and playing it.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah, and you know, it just brought immense joy to us too, because now we could watch him, and we were inspired by his his ability to kind of move from the place he was in to a new place, and you just, it's self-perpetuating. It's a cycle that can upwardly spiral, as opposed to sometimes you get into a downward spiral. So.
Well, and for me, I think I held on to the pain and the grief for longer than I needed to, because I felt like that represented the connection to my brother, and I felt disloyal if I moved forward
Right.
and had growth. And then I realized over time that, wait a minute, when I'm holding on to the pain, that represents the way he died.
Yeah.
When I'm in the growth period and the transformation period, that represents the way he lived.
Right.
And that is the connection.
And he would want you to move ahead,
Yes.
and transform. I mean, that's probably one of the great ways to honor a loved one who's passed on.
Absolutely. So on that note, where do we find all of you if people out there want more information or want to connect?
Well, you can find me at jpsantoro@aol.com. As I mentioned, I'm the last of the AOL people, so
I love
that should be easy to remember.
Well, and I'll say, as an organization, reach out to the Compassionate Friends if you're a bereaved parent, sibling, or grandparent. We have tons of resources, and our national website is right on there. You can just reach out to us. And then personally, it would be Shari, SHARIOLO5 @gmail.com.
And Andy, we only have a few minutes here, so
Yes, I'll try to be really quick. The easiest way to find me is to just find me at Compassionate Friends, Andy at CompassionateFriends.org, or you can reach me at the Satori Group at andy.mcniel, MCNIEL, at thesatorigroup.org.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here today. And for those of you out there that don't have hope yet and have not had, growth yet, be patient with yourself, give yourself grace, and hold on to people that are further down the line like us. And we always say, please lean on our hope until you find your own, and God bless. Thank you, and thank you, everybody.
I've learned that it helped me to help others, to know I'm not the only one, put one foot in front of the other, find a life.
Adding hope to the darkness, you start on the trip to recovery.
Reach deep down inside and say, I am going to live on.
We laugh, we cry, and remember.
Hope without action doesn't work. Hope with action can change the world.
We always say, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours.